Kieran's in Battersea. Kieran, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Very well indeed. What do you want to tell me?
Remember when they said take back control?
I do.
Absolutely. Remember when they said take back control of our borders?
Yes.
For the big things of Brexit. Did you know, and I'm not going to say where, you can come into the UK through some of the biggest UK's biggest ports and not see one UK customs official.
Yeah.
You can effectively go back to the first caller where you're forced into smuggling. Not saying that I have done it, because I haven't. You can bring things in unchecked.
Yes.
Going out, French enforce the rules. You get the douane quite a lot on the platforms and at the other end where you have to do your declarations and they have to be bang on.
Well, didn't Rees-Mogg actually say, again, one of those moments where you wonder whether he's too ignorant to realise what he's saying or too dishonest to acknowledge it? Didn't he actually say if we introduce the checks that are needed, it would cost too much money to justify doing it? So there's no checks at all, not just at the port you described, but they're worried about rancid meat getting in that you wouldn't be able to offload anywhere else in Europe, but you can drive it all the way. I think there was an example, wasn't there, of rotten pig meat coming in from Romania relatively recently, and we don't have checks on this side because we don't have the infrastructure, the will or the money to introduce them, and presumably the political reality is something that Rees-Mogg and his mates are still trying to keep from the British people.
Remember when all those years ago, seems such a long time ago now, where I said the first point of entry into a third country should be at the port itself and on the border, like you have in Switzerland and like you have in Norway. When you come off the train or the ferry to the UK, you can drive all the way to Ashford, which is 15 miles inland, before you have to do a declaration, or if you get called in. So you get a green or an amber light. So you've driven inland. You could have offloaded your stuff anywhere en route before you're even checked.
Yeah, of course.
Going back to how it's affected, I mean, it's been a hard year.
Just for people who don't know, Kieran is an international courier, but became known as Kieran the van driver as a consequence of ringing into this programme, and other news organisations who were in the habit of hiring guests from think tanks or political parties suddenly discovered what a great idea it would be to speak to people actually doing it for a living and finding out what they thought was going to happen or was what was actually going to happen. And so as a consequence of phoning into this programme, he popped up on various TV stations and offered evidence-based predictions and analyses of what was likely to happen. Is there anything you haven't been proved right about?
I hate to say this, but no.
No, you're in good company.
I think everything I said, even the most ardent leavers who do the same job as me, we had this discussion as well, where I was absolutely staggered by the amount of people that vote to leave that do the job I do. I bumped into one of the drivers 2 weeks ago on the way to Paris. And he now hates Brexit because of the paperwork and the headaches it's causing. They've come to realise, what's actually happened in true life. Now, one of my customers, I've just come back from Paris. I'm in Battersea at the moment. I've just dropped off over at Heathrow Airport. They've had a truck stuck at Folkestone for 2 weeks because of one commodity code that was wrong on the import paperwork. 2 weeks that truck sat there, and they've run out of stock. And I had to go all the way out to Paris to go and collect as much as I could for them to bring it back.
So they can keep their doors open.
Yeah, absolutely. The only reason I am still working, James, because I hardly get any calls now for any work. It's just gone, right?
Yeah.
I transport empty packaging, which is the only thing that requires what's called an oral declaration, and it has to have been in general circulation before January 2020. Used empty packaging is the only reason I am still working. I've had some artwork out of a big art school in London that they've been trying to get out of the country for a year. They can't get it out because it's being sold commercially to a private individual in Paris that can get it valued at an a gallery in Paris, determine what the duties are, and they need the VAT numbers and all the rest of it. I don't get involved in that side of it. Simply, the job hasn't gone.
Good grief.
Now, it's a nightmare. It really is.
I'm going to run out of time. I'm going to run out of time. So very briefly, is there any light at the end of the tunnel?
This current trade deal, no. And as your first caller said, even if we went into the single market or a sort of single market like Switzerland, you're still going to need customs declarations anyway.
Yeah, no, we'd be all right in the single. We'd be all right in the single market and the customs union, wouldn't we? Because.
Well, I'd love to go back to how it was.
No, I know you would. I'm just thinking. Yeah, there are. I mean, the problem is that's membership in all but name, isn't it? And that would involve the restoration of the free movement that we were encouraged to celebrate the abolition of. I haven't even touched on that. How did we become a country where people like Priti Patel stand up and tell you to celebrate the fact that you have surrendered your own freedom of movement across 27 countries? Well, they have kept it. They've just one country they can't move to anymore, whereas you can't move to any. Kieran, thank you, as ever. And I'm sorry, a bit like me, I imagine. I bet you wish you'd been wrong about at least some of this.